So hi everyone, and welcome to this talk. My name is Richard, and today we will talk about a very exciting topic, pivot tables. Okay, so I know it sounds a bit nerdy, but let's make a deal. I'll try my best to go over this topic with you, and you get to ask your questions and try to catch me off guard. So, my talk title is From Cells to Insights. So I'm going here to start with a single cell. And this single cell here has a value, 17. Okay, so this is a mysterious number for now. It could be anything. It could be a sale, could be an invoice, it could be my bank account balance, it could be the number of drinks you're going to have tonight. We don't know, right? So this is just a number. Well, this number is in fact a value in a business transaction, a purchase order in fact, okay? And those transactions are very precious to us because they let us record everything that happens in the database. And then this is also where we can see at what date it occurred, who was involved, the amount, the invoice, everything. Now, if you start to put thousands and thousands of the records together, we start to get something powerful, pivot tables. Pivot tables are tools that you use to actually capture and organize all these transactions together into what we call dimensions. So here you can see everything per quarter and then per purchase manager. And now you start to get and compare those figures together, right? This is where trends start to appear. But we can do even better. We can put that in a graph. And then boom, you would have shapes, colors that help you see and understand the data even more easily. So here you would spot that in October there was a slowdown period, and also that new purchase managers only started from 2025, here with the colors orange. Now to this, you can add more KPIs, more figures, more charts, and then you'll end up with a dashboard. The dashboard is like the ultimate version or the final form of what reporting can do. And this is really where data starts to tell a story that will give you insights, and insights that will let you take the right decisions. Now, this is the whole journey that data takes, okay? So from cells to pivots to spreadsheets to charts and to dashboards, from cells to insights, all right? Now, in only 30 minutes, I won't have the time to walk you through the whole journey. So what I will do is focus on the most essential part, or the most pivotal part, pivot tables. So if that sounds great, then let's see the agenda for today. After this short introduction, I'm going to talk about what is a pivot table, and more specifically, what is a pivot table in Odoo. And then we'll see how to insert this pivot into a spreadsheet, because this is where all the magic happens, formulas, analysis, and then we'll see how to manipulate those pivots. Finally, I'll conclude with some best practices. Okay, so right ahead, what are pivot tables and why do they matter? You will know that using an ERP system, a software like Odoo, you will generate a lot of data. Okay, so everything that you do, all operations that you have, are going to be recorded. Pivot tables, as I said before, can be used to aggregate everything together and then organize it for you to have something that is usable. To be able to do that, the pivot tables in Odoo will use the information that is stored on each record. And for that, we use what we call the fields in Odoo. Okay, so a field is an information. And there are two different types of fields. The first one is categorical. Categorical fields are like the buyer, the date, the country, and those will be used as dimensions of your pivot. As we saw together before, we had columns per date and probably rows per product or per purchase managers. Okay? Then you also have numerical fields. Numerical fields are like the count, the total, the average cost, something that has a number attached to it. And these will be measures of the pivots. Okay, so for the intersection of a specific date and a specific product, let's say, you would have a total. The intersection is the measure. All right? I think that's enough theory. Let's directly jump into Odoo to see that together. All right? So, I just landed here with my little rocket in Odoo 19. And for today, I'll just choose something quite simple. I have a business that purchases raw materials. I need quality leather, metal, wood, you name it. So everything would happen here in purchase. So let's see what's inside. In purchase, we'll find all the different transactions that my purchase managers did. If I go into one of them, I'll see that the purchase managers is, of course, directed towards a vendor specifically at a specific date as well. Those fields are going to be dimensions in my pivots. I can group them by date, group them by vendor, all right? I also have the total. The total will be my future measures in my pivot because those are the numerical fields I talked about right before. If this is clear, I'll now move to the reporting menu of purchase, go here and display the pivot view of my purchases. So here the pivot presents itself a bit like a table, okay? A table where you have the choice to add new dimensions. So clicking here on the plus lets you see all the different choices that you can have, and you can even go deeper here in custom group to see more options of grouping. Okay, here I'll choose the order date with a granularity per month, and then I have all my month here with every time the measures displayed for that month. If I want to keep it more simple, I'll click on measures, right, where I can see everything available, and then untick total and count to only have the untaxed total, let's say. Here I can also add a dimension in the rows, and there I'll be able to group it by buyer, for example. Okay, so this is how you can understand those pivot tables in Odoo and how you can play with it. Here I'll keep it simple. I only keep the month and the total there, and now I will insert it in spreadsheet. Okay, so inserting in spreadsheet here and creating a new one, I'll end up in Odoo spreadsheet with my pivot table as I saw it before, but directly in my spreadsheet environment. And this needs to take me back to the slides because I need to talk about the pivot table insertion for a bit. Because there are two types of insertion for pivot tables. Okay, the first one is the static insertion. So this is the default insertion mode. So here when I inserted it, it was static. Static actually means that you have an explicit formula, so a single formula for each cell. This leads to a rigid display. What I mean by this is that if you go to this spreadsheet there, every single value that you see there, right, is the result of an Odoo formula. I think this is better actually. An Odoo formula, okay? This Odoo formula works a bit like a request. It will check in the database to see what's the amount there for a specific month. If I go here to the right, you will see that each cell has a different formula, okay? So this is a rigid display in the sense that for now, it takes all the totals up to August and nothing for September yet. So you can understand the static pivot as a snapshot of how it looked like before, and when you inserted it, you have the same exact pivot, okay? This means that you don't have a new column for September, for example. This static pivot is useful for quick computations, for example, and this is what it is meant for. If I go back here and I would like to see the difference between 2 months, it is quite easy. You would go insert a new column, do this minus that, right? And then you'll be happy to find the difference. So this is good for quick computations, okay? But now let's talk about the other type of insertion, which is much more powerful. Dynamic pivot. So how do you insert a pivot dynamically? If you want to do this, I'll just open a new sheet, okay? And go to the data menu. The data menu here lets you see the data sources that are linked to your spreadsheet. So here I can find the pivot I inserted before. I can now reinsert it, this time in dynamic mode. If I do this, I insert this like that, the formula that you see there is much simpler. It's only pivot 1, so show me pivot 1, right? And then the difference is you only have one single formula that renders all the values at once in an array, right, with all the cells inside. So this is what we call an array formula that will expand and really show the pivot as is, okay? So that means that if I now go to the spreadsheet, right, and check this, I have the column for August. What I will do is first name this, and then let's make a new purchase together. I'll go to purchase, I'll create a new one for that vendor and a specific product and confirm, okay? If I go back now to documents and check my spreadsheet, I first have my static pivot. So remember my first sheet was static. The first sheet here doesn't have a new column for September, all right? However, the second one here, where I inserted the dynamic version of my pivot, now has a new column for September, okay? So this is a difference. The dynamic pivot will always reflect what should be seen from the database, where the static one is just the snapshot of when I inserted it at the first place. If I go back here, then I understand that the dynamic pivot is much more useful for long-term reporting. If you do a quick computation for now, then the static is okay. If you want to build a long-term, long-term reporting, sorry, then you'll need a dynamic pivot, of course. The dynamic pivot also comes with a little thing that you need to take care about is the spill error. What I mean by this is that if you try to do the same thing as before, so I'll go here and try to do the difference between 2 months as I did, so this minus that, I have the total, but I now have an error. This error says that the array cannot be displayed because now there's a formula in the middle of it, so you don't have space to display everything. So if you want to do the same thing as before, you'll need to learn how to use dynamic pivots. And that's actually the point of the next section, pivot table manipulation, all right? So Manipulation is all about being able to add, edit dimensions, and also measures. So I'll just jump into Odoo. That's actually better to even see it. To do that, I'll right-click on any cell of my dynamic pivot, and then I'll go down to the pivot properties. Here you'll see the side panel. The side panel here shows you all the dimensions first, so in columns, nothing in rows. In my columns, I can see the order date. The order date, I can now change the granularity to be per year, for example. The dynamic pivot will reflect it, sorry. The static one, however, gives now a bunch of errors. Why so? Because the formulas were meant to display it per month, but now it is grouped by year. So now the static pivot is not valid anymore for this reason. So the reason why dynamic pivots are much more powerful. I'll go here, I can even add more dimensions, right? A bit like in the backend before. I can add the buyer, and even better, I can even drag and drop it to organize it differently. And new feature from Odoo 19, you can now also collapse and expand those subgroups together, quite convenient. That's something that we can now do. I can also add measures, okay? So here for the measures, I can say, let's see the number of purchase orders, so the count per person, so I can see how much they worked or how many purchases they sent, okay? So let's talk about what we tried to do before. We tried to add the difference between one month to another. To do that with dynamic pivots, I will first reset it to be like this. And then what I will do is to add a new measure. Okay, I will add a new measure, the exact same one. I just use the untaxed total. I have 2 times the same column. And now I will rename the second one to be the delta minus 1. And boom, I only change the title. There's no IA or, yeah, IA, I would change all the formulas yet. I'll need to think about it myself. To do it, I'll use this with the cogwheel. The cogwheel here lets you change the way that the figures are displayed. So for now, there's no computation, so just the amount total is displayed. If I change this and see the options, I can change this to be the difference from something else, the previous period. If I do this, now the column changed, and I can now see all the differences month by month because I chose to display it in a different way. Okay? So that's how you would do this for dynamic pivots. But now let's do more things. The thing I would like to do with you now is to take the average purchase order. Okay, so I have many different purchase managers. They do purchases. I want to see how they perform against the average of all purchase orders. If I want to do this, I'll go here to my properties, right-click properties, and then I will duplicate the pivot. I would like to keep this one because this one is interesting, but I would like to duplicate it to see it differently. If I duplicate, I do have a new sheet that opens, and now I can play with it, with the first one that stays the same. So here I'm going to group this by buyer, all right? Remove this measure, which I don't need anymore. And now I would like to have the average. So what you would need to do here at this point is to have the average there, right, of these cells. If you were to get those figures like this, then you can insert something quite nice, which would be a chart that looks like this. Okay, so this is what we want to achieve. You can have the average like stood as a line, right, and you can have a nice comparison point. However, this would not work so well. Why? Because then the average for now is based on this range. If you have like a new purchase manager that is hired and start to being active, then this will not stay correct. So for this, you'll need to work differently. So I will now introduce another feature that we will use, not new from 19, we already have it from 18, but this is computed measures. So adding a measure have access to all existing ones, but you can also create a new measure that you will compute yourself. If you do this, I can now call this the average, okay? And I need to get the total. To get the total, I see it here. If I copy-paste this cell to be somewhere else, like this, you will see that Odoo gives me now the static formula that I had before, which is always correct, by the way, so I can now use it. I can use this formula here in the computed measure. If I do this, I can now see the total everywhere. Now I need to divide this by the number of buyer. How can I do this? I can add a new measure with the buyer here that will get me the count of each person. So now we can see how many times the purchase managers were appearing. If I take the count distinct this, so I change the aggregation type, I can now see only counted at 1, right? And now this value that I will copy and paste there gives me the formula to this value. So I will now use this, divide it here, and there we go, right? We have what we had before. So I'm going to just hide the buyer, remove the total, so that I can have something clean in my chart. select the column, insert chart, and I'm good to go, okay? So we have a second one, I like it, I put it in my main sheet. Let's do something else now. I'd like to see also all the purchases made but per team, okay? So all these users are in teams, I would like to see the total per team. If I do this, same story, I'll go to properties, the cogwheel and duplicate, again, to have another one to play with. And now I'll have this. So I remove everything, keeping the total. I would like to see it per team. This is a new feature from Odoo 19, okay? This new feature here lets you go and select the buyer first, okay? And this little arrow there is super powerful. It lets you dive into the buyer information and group the data by something from the buyer, okay? If I do this, I now have access to their team, and I can now see the total per team, okay? So that you can really fetch and group data from somewhere else into this pivot table. So same idea here, I will also remove the total, and what I can simply do with that, insert a chart, and boom, I have this. Let's show the values, if you want to show the values in there. If you prefer to have percentages, you will go there, right-click, properties, and the measure, you can also express it as something else. You will show value as the percentage. And if you do this, you have the percentage, right? So copy and pasting this into the main sheet again to group things together. And let's do a last one because it's quite fun. The last one will be a bit, say, more fancy to understand, but the idea is to see the purchase orders made across all vendors. And I would like to see that in 2034, I purchased more to certain vendors than the other in 2035, okay? So let's do this together. Pivot properties, here, duplicate, and then I'll group this by vendor now. So vendor, don't need this, and tax total, okay? And then I'll use the order date in years like this, removing the totals again, because it is a parameter of the formula that I can choose. And now I have this. If I have this, I can now insert a new type of chart that we cover in 19, right? Because I have many different types of charts. And this one is quite cool. It's called the radar chart. The radar chart looks like this. It's a bit like a spider web, a web spider, I don't know. Yeah, this, right? And what this does is that it tells you that in 2034, you purchased for 264K to this specific supplier, but in 2035, there's only 133 so far, okay? So, quite cool, I think. I like it, at least. And now what I mentioned, what I noticed, is that there's too many months. I would like to reduce the window that I see here. For that, I'll use a global filter. This global filter here is quite cool. It lets you create something to play with, the date, for example. And then here, in the date, you will be able to say to Odoo, I would like to filter on the order date, not the creation date, not the transfer date, not something else, just the order date of the purchase. All right? Because I have all different pivots for a total, I need to specify it here and save. If I now use it, right, to not be all time, but specifically the year of 2025, filter, I can only see the month here on the left, and everything else was also filtered on this value. So global filter in that way. I filter on everything at once. Okay? So I like it. Let's talk about how we can make it to the dashboard. I'll go to File, Add to Dashboard. It's named RNG, that's cool. And then I'll insert it in the section Services. If I do this, I end up with this nice dashboard. Okay, so the filters are on the top here to be used. And I can also add new ones. I can also add new ones because I'd like to see it, for example, with those suggestions, also a new feature. If I would like to filter on vendors, I can just click here. Everything is already matched. Save. I would like to do it on buyers. Save. Category. Save. Okay. If I do this, go back, refresh my page for changes to be applied, then I'll be able, for example, to filter on a specific supplier, right? I can also have, say, another one here and there. Filter, and now everything is filtered on vendors. And my spider web now looks like a triangle, okay? Because only 3 suppliers here. All right, so that was quite fun. Let's go back to the slides, my boring slides, just to talk about the best practices now for a little bit. The first thing I would like to discuss with you is that pivots are most of the time better than list views. You can also insert list views because they are basically just spreadsheets in the backend of Odoo. And if you insert it, that would work. But I would like you to think about the future. Okay, it's a bit dramatic to say like that, actually, but to be future-proof, what I mean. Okay, so if you insert the list of 2,000 sale orders, it might work now, but you need to know that your database is going to live for 3, 5, or even more years, so maybe 10,000 quotations at that point. So if you insert a list, you will need to first maintain it, and also you'll have performance issues, because it will take more and more time to load. And if you do that, then you have a reporting that will be slower and slower. That's not what you want. The pivot, it's better because it's much more efficient at grouping things together, so you load less values. The other reason why pivots are also a good feature is that it still keeps access to single elements, because you would be afraid, okay, I have those figures, I don't know where they come from. You just click on it. If you click on it, you have access to all the records that participated in that amount. Dynamic pivots, as we mentioned, because it gives access to computed measures, which are super powerful, basically. Everything that you would like to do is possible through computed measures. Second one is about keeping dimensions low, because you would be tempted to see, okay, I would like to have a pivot that is grouped by company, by vendor, per date, blah, 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 and then it gets like a super precise drill down. But if you do this, it's not readable anymore, okay? So you only display the dimension if it makes sense for you to compare it, but otherwise you don't need to put so many dimensions, because keep in mind that you can use global filters to narrow down on what you need to see, okay? Third one here is for people that are used to reporting. I know that you are used to do reporting, say, on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis. You take all your financials, you publish it, you present it. That's good. But Odoo it is a bit different, because you can really create one reporting once and for all, and then you can only use global filters that really select a specific period. So if you build it correctly from the first time, you can reuse it for future periods, which is super powerful. And with the right filter, you can even go back in time. A bit fancy to say it like that, but it means that you can filter on all transactions up to a certain date. So it's a bit like going back in time. All right? So let's close this with my conclusion. So we started today with a single cell, right? So just a number without a specific meaning. But we also saw that every insight starts from operational data. So you need to understand and see how Odoo creates data, where the information is, and also see where you can find what you want to see. With that, you will now use pivot tables to organize and structure everything together, because they are the most efficient tool at doing this. You will insert it in spreadsheet, have fun with formulas and stuff, and then you will have the added value in your final dashboards, which is actually only the tip of the iceberg, because everything needs to be done before. So that's pretty much it. My goal for today was for you to really walk away not so much afraid of this anymore. I hope you have a clearer view on the path that data takes from your Odoo usage day to day to your dashboards. So now let's see your questions with the time remaining. Thank you. My name is Richard. Let's see if we have some other questions. Maybe not.
Okay, Richard, thank you for your...
Hi.
Okay, Richard, thank you for your insightful talk.
Yep.
Okay,
I thought you would be coming from that way, actually. Yeah, tell me.
I'm glad I managed to surprise you.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised, to be fair.
So thank you for your insightful conversation about the pivot tables.
Mm-hmm.
And now let's address the audience's Q&A questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you got the feedback that it was a great talk. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And then the first question is dynamic pivot. Is it also available in previous versions 17 and 18?
Yes, but less powerful. So the dynamic pivot existed from Odoo 17. The formula is different. It's named odoo.pivot.table. Okay, so the name was different, and also the features are different. So the fact that you can really play around with measures. So I'll go back here, there, in the side panel, basically, right? So everything here to be able to play around new dimensions, move it around, new computation, new measures. This is from 18 and onwards. Okay. In 19, what was basically new with pivot tables is the fact that you can really drill down. So what I showed before here with the buyer. So buyer, and then you have this arrow to deep dive into models. This is new from 19. The other thing that was new in 19 was, I did forget now. I said it before. Okay. Yeah, but basically from 18 onwards, you have most of the features I showed today. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Richard. And the next question is, why are pivot tables not always dynamic? It would skip one additional step once doing long-term reporting and good for quick computation too.
Yeah, true. I kind of agree. So I would also prefer, because I also build reporting, I would prefer the pivot to be dynamic at first. It was more of a choice for users, actually. So it's easier for users that are not used to the tool so much because it still requires some time to get used to it. If you still see the pivot, if you insert it, you most of the time, I would say, try to do quick computations. So it's easier for users to get used to spreadsheets first. But if they need and if they are advanced, and would like to do more things, then they can derivative switch for dynamic pivots.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Our time is up, but that would be all. Let's have one more clap of applause for Richard.
Thank you. Find me at the booth if you still have questions.